I would like to talk with you today about an interesting, very interesting commonality I see with those that make their first $1 million. They go on to make their first $1 million in the areas of entrepreneurship, doing what they love to do, etc. Everything we discuss on this channel. Now, as you may know, I've been an entrepreneur full-time since 2009. I have built an IT business to success from 2009 to 13. And also, I started a YouTube channel, which I also built to success. I started it in 2013. At that time, I also started a consulting practice, which I built to success. And over the years, I have personally made many millions of dollars. I even wrote a book recently. You may know about this book. I'll link in the description to it. The Direct Path to $1 million. Turn what you already have into a fortune. This is built on the foundation of building 3 successful businesses and having made many millions of dollars myself and securing financial freedom. I recommend this book. I would like to explore some aspects of this book today in our conversation. But more specifically, I would like to talk about how over the journey since 2009 to where we are right now, 2025, 16 years, I have worked with thousands of businesses, not just in consulting in the areas of innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, and leadership, but also in my IT business. I met a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs. I had exposure to the various aspects of their business because I wasn't just providing IT services. I had a genuine curiosity on how money was being made. I was, you could say, a student of making your first $1 million because that was very fascinating to me at that time while I was building my IT business. What are the things they're doing in their respective industries that is making them 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? How did they make their first million, etc.? And also, prior to that, when I was in corporate, big business, a large Fortune 500 company, billions of dollars, I was studying what was going on. Now, what I have found is a commonality. And every one of these entrepreneurs had this commonality. Some were more precise about this. In other words, they were applying this with consistency. And some, maybe at times they were, and at times they were not. So I would like to explore with you what this one thing is that I have seen the ones that make their first $1 million do, including myself, that results in the $1 million. And not only does it result in that first $1 million, if they consistently go about this, what we're going to talk about here, they go on to 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million in, as I always teach, a flow-based way. And without confusion, with clarity, no doubt. The ones that consider and apply what we're talking about here, which we have it narrowed down here, and I'm sharing with you. And again, this is not just with me, but working with thousands of businesses, my observations, the ones that succeeded. I would like to share with you exactly what they did in this video. Now, the commonality, the one thing. I titled this mind map here, you'll see, The Certain Way of $1 million. And notice I put a capital C and a capital W, the certain way to $1 million. Now, there's this interesting book. It's called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. You may know this book from the movie The Secret. Rhonda Byrne, who wrote the book The Secret and made the movie The Secret, talks about a particular book that transformed her life, and this was the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. In the start of the book, he says something very interesting. He says, this book is pragmatical, not philosophical, a practical manual, not a treatise upon theories. It is intended for men and women whose most pressing need is for money, who wish to get rich first and philosophize afterward. This is a very precise point. Who wish to get rich first and philosophize afterward. Why this is helpful is I have seen many times, and I was involved with this at times, where I may get caught up in particular esoteric theories, philosophy, business theories, etc., and be confused by them in mind, when in actuality, the way to actualizing $1 million does not need to be riddled with confusion. So in other words, the person in mind is confused by esoteric theories, by philosophical theories, and also theories when it comes to the different aspects of entrepreneurship. It could be in relation to innovation, sales, marketing, finance, and leadership. And that's why I created this book here, to be very direct and to the point, 100 pages, not a very thick book, not required to be a thick book, but rather precise and to the point. Everything else you acquire along the way. That is what he's talking about here. He says, it is for those who have so far found neither the time, the means, nor the opportunity to go deep into the study of metaphysics, but who want results and who are willing to take the conclusions of science as a basis for action without going into all the processes by which those conclusions were reached. So as you know, if you're a viewer of my other channel, I'm a fan of metaphysics. I am a fan of esoteric theories. I am a fan of philosophy. Although I have found that through clarity, I can articulate the point, I can share it through metaphysical concepts, share it through philosophy, share it through theoretical, interesting ideas that spawn from experience, personal experience. And then what happens is it could be both entertaining, it could be engaging, and also it can facilitate results. Now, if you're interested in this book, my book, The Direct Path to $1 Million, Turn What You Already Have into a Fortune, I'll link in the description to the book on Amazon. So, I'm going to pull up on my screen now the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles, which was published in 1910. And I would like to explore with you this, what he refers to in the book is as acting in the certain way. He also says thinking in the certain way and acting in the certain way. What does he mean by acting in the certain way? Does it mean do things according to how this entrepreneur does it, or this other person does it, or this or that, even though they may say that that is the way or the best way, etc.? Is that what he's referring to? Well, let's explore. Now, notice something in this book. I'm going to do a search for the word certain. The word certain, and sometimes it pulls up certainly as well, certain and certainly shows up about 84 times according to my search here. So let's do a little search. It says, Chapter 2, there is a science of getting rich, and it is an exact science, like algebra or arithmetic. There are certain laws that govern the process of acquiring riches. But notice, when he says there are certain laws, although it says certain, that C in certain is lowercase. Notice that. There are certain laws that govern the process of acquiring riches, but that C is in lowercase. Now, if I scroll down here, we see uppercase C and uppercase W. What does he say? He says the ownership of money and property comes as a result of doing things in a certain way. Those who do things in this certain way, whether on purpose or accidentally, get rich, while those who do not do things in this certain way, and again, it's capital C and capital W, no matter how hard they work or how able they are, remain poor. That's a very bold statement. So we notice something very interesting. Doing things in this certain way. It says it once, and then again it says, do things in this certain way. Capital C, capital W. Let's scroll down. Let's see if there's more instances. Over here it says, and one gets rich while other fails. It indicates that getting rich is the result of doing things in a certain way. Capital C, capital W. Very interesting. In this book, he gives it. He gives you the key. And notice, it's not just certain way, C capitalized, W capitalized, but doing things in a certain way, or sometimes it says the certain way. For example, if I scroll down and search for certain again, it says if getting rich is the result of doing things in a certain way, and if like causes always produce like effects, then any man or woman who can do things in that way can become rich, and the whole matter is brought within the domain of exact science. Now, you can access a copy of this online. It's in public domain, or you could buy a copy of this book. And you'll notice that it says the certain way, capital C, capital W, or a certain way, capital C, capital W, and it's accompanied by doing things in the certain way, or acting in the certain way. Now, what is this certain way that he speaks about? What he speaks about is not about looking to this world here or what other people are doing and thinking that you need to do it their way because their way is the best way. Even if it seems to suggest that that is the only way and you cannot succeed if you do it this way or that way, and you must do it that way. And that's why in this book, I removed those biases. I spoke about my personal experience and also working with thousands of businesses. And I very clearly put it in chapter 2 here. I say, your way is the best way. How does it relate to acting in the certain way? And what does he mean by this? What he means is the way of certainty. Certainty. Going about whatever you do in the certain way, the way of certainty. In the way of certainty, I talked about this in a recent video, not on this channel, but my other channel. I'll link in the description to it. I talked about how we can release the wanting, needing, and waiting, the wanting, needing, and waiting, by knowing that you are already that which you desire to be. You already have what you desire. You have it. If you're interested in that, again, metaphysics discussion, philosophical, metaphysics, spiritual discussion on this topic of being, I'll link in the description to that video. Now, what happens, let's say, is if the individual acts in the certain way, there is no wanting, needing, waiting in the particular areas of forming client relationships. And again, I discuss these in the book, so let's explore prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, and ongoing client relationships. These are high leverage areas. Generally speaking, if you bring in more qualified prospects, you acquire more clients. Generally speaking, not always the case, because you can have substantial business from a few clients with a few prospects. Yet, we can go about prospecting in the certain way, like how he describes. Same with lead generation. So prospecting is actively going to places where your prospects are and initiating conversations. Without the wanting, needing, and waiting, we go about it in the certain way, the way of certainty, or you could say confidence, the way of certainty. It's magic. If the individual goes about doing things in the certain way, what happens is we do see more conversions. In other words, they meet the ideal prospects more often. Conversations flow without the stress and frustration that is the result of wanting, needing, waiting, as they're going about things, whatever it is they're doing in prospecting in the certain way, the relationship also tends to be more fruitful a lot quicker, we can say. As a matter of fact, I've heard things personally, and I trust you have as well, if you live in the certain way, the way he describes it, which is, again, not doing this particular prospect technique or this and that. It's going about things in the way of certainty. As you go about doing things in the certain way, there is no wanting, needing, and waiting. And I'll go through some examples to describe what I mean, practically speaking, with respect to prospecting. So you prospect and conversions increase. No stress, no frustration, flow-based way. Same with lead generation. So prospecting, you go places and acquire clients, meet people who become clients, referral partners, etc. More of that is discussed in the book. Lead generation is, for example, putting up lead magnets, generating leads. I don't consider one better than another. For my IT business, I did more prospecting. For my YouTube channel, I did more lead generation. For my consulting practice, I did a blend more so of prospecting and lead generation, and now and then I still do prospecting. I don't consider one better than another. A lot of times we find is if a person is afraid of prospecting, afraid of lead generation, they can release the identification to those particular beliefs that are generating the resistance. That's it. The beliefs are generating the resistance, the beliefs in the subconscious mind. If the individual was not identified with those beliefs that are generating resistance, that are generating the wanting, needing, waiting, they would naturally go about doing things in the certain way. So not only do I teach going about doing things in the certain way, you can also go about doing things in the certain way without trying to do things in the certain way. It naturally happens, the prospecting, the lead generation, and the client acquisition. So client acquisition is where we have exploratory conversations, as discussed in the book. And by the way, we're going to be exploring upcoming more discussions that is going to be built on the foundation of this book here. So I encourage you to get the book so that way it adds more context and we can be very precise. We can be very precise so that you can make your first $1 million without the unnecessary theories and conjecture that we were talking about this earlier. Why did he say what he said in the beginning? For those who wish to get rich first and philosophize afterwards. Because although we may find some interesting esoteric theories, some interesting theories on business, they might not be applicable or have never been proven in equation. And that is what we can call conjecture. It is not based on experience, although it may sound nice. So how does the individual know? Well, you know based on experience. You can, as you know, as you go about your experiences, going about doing things in the certain way, what just sounds nice and what actually works. Clarity. So client acquisition is sales presentation, conversations, exploratory conversations. You could do it online, offline. You could do it in group settings. Essentially, it's where prospects and leads become clients. That's client acquisition. And if you go about it in the certain way, there is no wanting, needing, waiting, and we do see, as a result of going about client acquisition like we do with lead generation and prospecting and the aspects in relation to it in the certain way, conversions go up. And not only is it effortless, not only is it flow-based, but it's practical. The results happen. As mentioned, that I have worked with thousands of businesses, and Wallace Wattles was spot on with what he said in The Science of Getting Rich. Those that acquire riches go about doing things in the certain way, which again is not this particular way or that particular way or this certain way or that certain way. The way of certainty, the certain way. Certainty. As you are certain, there is no wanting, needing, waiting. Prospecting, for example, you see someone, maybe you go to an event, you see someone you're interested in starting a conversation with, you walk over, not from a place of force. Egotism has nothing to do with this, but a calm assurance, like Earl Nightingale said in the wonderful audio, The Strangest Secret. You walk over and you start a conversation. You don't want, you don't need, you don't wait. Everything happens perfectly as it does. We'll go through examples. And the same with respect to ongoing client relationships. So why do I focus on these areas here in this video? Because this is where the money is made. Prospecting, generally speaking, you acquire more prospects, you get more clients. Generally speaking, you get more leads, you get more clients, qualified leads, more clients specifically. You acquire more clients, you do more business, you make more money. You engage in ongoing business with existing clients through referrals, partnerships, creating products and services and offering to them, partnering with other businesses to create products and services to offer to them, also offering from other businesses their products and services, which I did in my IT business as well, adds more revenue and thus allows you to achieve your $1 million plus whatever your goal may be, easier, faster, and more natural. This is really about relationships, as you can see. So let's tie this in now. Acting in the certain way, in a very practical way with respect to prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, and ongoing client relationships, which are the revenue aspects of the business, revenue aspects. So prospecting, waiting, example, waiting for readiness before striking up conversations instead of trusting in spontaneous, genuine engagement. So you go to an event, you walk into a venue, you see someone you're interested in starting a conversation with, you walk up to them in the certain way, the way of certainty, and you initiate the conversation. You don't worry about what to say. You don't want anything from them. You don't need anything from them. This is a nuance point. One could say, well, don't you want to have business from them? Don't you need them to have a client relationship with you in order to succeed? What I'm talking about is none of that is there. You drop it and you allow the conversation to flow perfectly as it does wherever it flows. You know, for example, they could become a client. They could refer business to you. They could share something insightful with you. You can end up transforming their life in a mutually beneficial way by sharing something with them. Even if money is not exchanged, what happens is everyone benefits greatly. So rather than waiting for the right moment or readiness before striking up a conversation, you walk over and start the conversation. Now, here's the benefit. Many benefits for acting in the certain way. But one of the benefits for acting in the certain way is that physically the body transforms. Neurologically, there are changes that happen. There's a good book to read called The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Deutsch. To the repetition of acting in the certain way, physically the body transforms to be supportive of the certain way. It's easier than to be in flow. Maybe in the earlier stages, it might be challenging to start that conversation because the individual is not acting in the certain way. That's okay. You cannot identify with the wanting, needing, waiting, and start that conversation anyways. Repetition again and again and again. So not waiting before starting up a conversation for a perfect moment, etc. Just trusting that everything flows to be in perfect harmony. The next is needing. Needing validation before connecting with potential clients, seeking reassurance that they'll be well received. None of that. Because what I have found in entrepreneurship is at times, if you are the first person to start a conversation with someone, what I have seen many times is you can acquire them as a client because there are other vendors in the room who are not acting in the certain way and don't end up starting that conversation with this business that is looking for that particular product or service. There are times where I have acquired clients by just being the first to start a conversation with them. So when I walk into a room, immediately I go and start a conversation. I don't want, need, or wait for anything. I act in the certain way. Even, for example, I know some people that do door-to-door sales. Now, some might find that to be scary, do door-to-door sales, but they're not afraid because they act in the certain way. And they make quite a bit of money by going up to people and knocking on their door, starting a conversation. If they want to do the deal, great. If they don't want to do the deal, great, because they don't want, need, or wait for anything. They're genuinely interested in seeing if there is a match here. And if there's a match, let's move forward with the deal. If it's not a match, that's great. They may get a referral. They don't feel drained because they're not putting up a persona. They're not putting up a false identity construct. They are, as we discuss on my other channel, being as they are. Unconditional love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. Practically speaking, in prospecting, practically speaking, by acting in the certain way. Waiting for the perfect script instead of allowing presence, curiosity, and intuition to guide the interaction. You know, a person might say, let's use a sales script. Nothing wrong with the sales script. Nothing wrong with I give some good conversation starters in this book, etc. But there's nothing wrong with just starting a conversation to see where it flows. As a matter of fact, acting in the certain way doesn't mean you need this or that in order to act in the certain way. You can just be. Or another way of saying it is you can act in the certain way. And the conversations flow. As mentioned, what are the benefits of doing this? Over the course on the journey, I've noticed this in my life as well, is acting in the certain way in the earlier stages might be challenging, but through the repetition of acting in the certain way again and again and again, in prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, ongoing client relationships, and different areas of my life, what happens is physically, emotionally, mentally, everything is in coherence. This is a great way. I get a lot of questions about how do you bring yourself into coherence? Well, you bring yourself into coherence acting in the certain way. Physically, emotionally, mentally, everything aligns. I trust you see it. I trust you see that physically, the body, like when you go to the gym, is stimulated into acting in the certain way. Neurologically, everything realigns. Physically, the body language, what you say, what you don't say flows naturally. So another way to be in flow is to act in the certain way. And you have opportunities to do so during prospecting, which results in money. This is the beautiful thing. It's not like you're doing this and you're not getting benefits out of it. You're getting benefits out of it. And the practical benefits, not only from the spiritual catalyst and the transformation that happens, you get money from it. And the clients benefit greatly as well. You acquire clients, they benefit greatly from your products and services, etc. So the next is lead generation. Wanting viral results rather than sharing consistently and allowing trust to compound over time. This is a great example. My most popular video on my main YouTube channel, which has over a few million views, is my Power of the Subconscious Mind. I had no idea they were going to go viral. I had no idea that my first video on my other YouTube channel, which was me traveling and living out of the backpack when I transitioned from my IT business, would kick off that YouTube channel. I just acted in the certain way because I know I've seen it happen again and again and again. I act in the certain way without attachment to outcomes. I'm not waiting for viral results. If you get more views, great. If you don't get views, great. As I mentioned in a recent video, I'll link in the description to it. Before having even a few hundred subscribers, I had acquired $100,000 of business from the YouTube channel. And I discussed exactly what I did. I did all those things by acting in the certain way. So he's right. He's absolutely spot on with this book. I am not wanting viral results. I am not, in this example here, needing the design or tech to be flawless, delaying publication of valuable resources, waiting for a big audience or a perfect funnel before releasing helpful content or lead magnets. Do you realize that who you desire desires you? If there's a genuine desire for people to benefit greatly from your product or service, you have a desire to put out that content or put out that video, and there's always a match. The next is client acquisition. For example, wanting to avoid rejection, so they hesitate to make the offer at all. Look, this is something that you act in a certain way. In the earlier stages, it may be challenging. Through the repetition, you have no qualms, no hang-ups asking for money because you're not taking money from them. You are providing products and services that are beneficial, needed, useful, and they give you wonderful compensation in exchange, flow-based. Through acting in the certain way, there is no wanting, needing, waiting. This is all egotism here. The ego dissolves, and you have a conversation. You acquire the clients. Conversion goes up. Needing to convince. Let's look at this one. Instead of simply presenting the offer as a bridge to transformation, you have a conversation with them. You present the offer. If they want to move forward with the deal, great. If they don't want to move forward with the deal, great. You don't need to convince them. The results speak. As mentioned on my flow-based prosperity group coaching and mastermind service, I shared this a number of videos ago. I have 3 videos on there that we could say are client case studies. And we're just hanging out, having conversations, and they're sharing their experiences of what it's like to work with me. They have built successful businesses. I'm not trying to convince people who watch that video that they should work with me instead of this other service provider. I know that who you desire desires you. What is yours can never be taken away from you. That's why I put this book, I call it The Direct Path to $1 million. All this competition, ideas, confusion, egotism, as we said, even the wanting, needing, waiting can dissolve through the spiritual catalyst of entrepreneurship, practically speaking, through prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition. And that is all done by acting in the certain way. And that's why, again, we go back here. It says, this book is pragmatical, not philosophical, a practical manual, not a treatise upon theories. It's for those who wish to get rich and philosophize afterwards. You can philosophize afterwards if you'd like, because what happens then is it's built on results. It's not based on theories and conjecture that have never been proven to be effective, which can just confuse the mind further. It just adds more confusion in mind. And here we're about cutting the confusion, dissolving that confusion, not required. Why? It is confusion in mind that results in the individual not acting in the certain way. By dissolving that confusion in mind, by acting in the certain way, clarity arises, and then you can you can share it in very cool, interesting philosophies, theories, esoteric, etc., that is based on results, that is based on reality, based on truth. So client acquisition, waiting for prospects, or waiting, for example, for prospects to chase them rather than extending warm values aligned with invitation. So these are some examples. What about ongoing client relationships, as we've been discussing, that it's helpful to not only acquire clients, but to discover more opportunities that you can engage in ongoing business with your existing clients. And what I noticed in my IT business, that most of my business was coming from a few of my clients. At one point, I had 50 clients in my IT business. That might not sound like a lot of clients. Consider in IT and doing what I was doing and how I was going about doing it, 50 is enough to have a substantial business. Now, a handful of those clients, 20%, let's say, were producing most of the revenue, 80-20 principle, which is not set in stone, but it's a good guide. So engaging in ongoing client relationships to facilitate more business is helpful. Again, how does this apply to acting in the certain way? Well, release the wanting for praise or approval from the clients to feel worthy or confident before you ask. Let's say we could work together in a different way. Here's another way we could work together. Oh, this other area, we can help you with this other area. Rather than wanting praise or approval of the wonderful service, you can start offering additional products and services. While it is helpful to provide some concrete results in onboarding, for example, you could do it as you're facilitating the client relationships. You don't have to wait till a particular point and then ask. What I'm getting at is all these rules, even in the book, he had lowercase certain laws, because these laws are just made up. These rules are just made up. And these rules aren't helpful if they're not helpful. And at times they could be restrictive and not necessary. And that's why we have these conversations here. They're not designed to tell you what to do. They're designed to release identification to all these illusory rules and thinking so that you could be real and realize that your way is the best way. And one of the ways we can do this, practically speaking, is by acting in the certain way. So you start the conversations in prospecting, you put up your lead magnets, etc., and you optimize along the way. You get it up there. I used to say this before. I get version 1 up as fast as possible and then get it to version 2, version 3 later on. For example, my 5 programs, I have refined them over the years. If you're interested in them, I'll link in the description to them. I have refined them over the years, but I didn't let perfectionism hold me back from getting version 1 out. I'm glad I got version 1 out. There were times where I released programs, not just these 5 programs, but ones that I've done with other organizations where we get version 1 out and they sell really well. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that would not have been actualized as in our bank accounts had I had waited another 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 months in order for it to be perfect. We got it up to, we could say, no pun intended, a certain level. And then what happens? We optimize. We discover, oh, there's additional needs that the clients have. And although the program can be refined further, they're genuinely reaching out for coaching, consulting, and done-for-you services, done-with-you services. Let's just reply back to them and offer them whatever, and we'll acquire them as clients. And that resulted in ongoing client relationships easier, faster. So needing to over-deliver constantly from insecurity, needing to over-deliver. By the way, none of the stuff is meant to shame and condemn. This is all designed to prove the point of how wanting, needing, waiting results in not acting in the certain way. And we have found that entrepreneurs, business owners, those that are interested in acquiring money, for example, through sales, etc., who act in the certain way acquire it easier, faster, without stress, without frustration, and it is what is producing results. So that stated, we can release the wanting, needing, and waiting by not adding some more esoterical theories and some techniques, etc., by just acting in the certain way. It's direct, it's to the point, it's effective, and then you can philosophize afterwards. You could do it this way. Although, let's say, there may be a need to philosophize or to come up with theories, but that is just based on particular beliefs in mind that suggest I need to come up with theories or philosophize or get it in this perfect way, whatever conceptually, then I can have, which is illusory. Again, what I'm talking about here is not theory and conjecture. This is based on building 3 successful businesses and working with thousands of entrepreneurs over the years. So I can honestly say that what he shared in this book is precise and to the point. And although he never got into the nuances of what we're talking about here, based on personal experience, I found that this wanting, needing, waiting was generating resistance to acting in the certain way. So another point when it comes to ongoing client relationships, needing to over-deliver consistently. Another point is waiting for the client to initiate feedback rather than checking in with warmth and care. Sending a couple text messages, sending some text messages now and then, some emails now and then. There may be nuances of these kinds of wanting, needing, waiting. And every time you release identification to wanting, needing, waiting, the natural result of that is acting in the certain way. And also, on the flip side, you can act in the certain way to release identification to wanting, needing, waiting. So if the individual discovers, oh, they are wanting, they're needing, they're waiting in relation to prospecting, in relation to lead generation, in relation to client acquisition, in relation to ongoing client relationships, the way to release it is not by theorizing more. That just results in more confusion in mind. That's what we found with these entrepreneurs. And again, this is from consulting with thousands of businesses over the years. More and more confusion in mind and procrastination, etc. And inevitably, they end up doing the thing anyways. So rather than waiting to do the thing later for this so-called perfect moment, they can just, in the moment, act in the certain way, as he discussed. Now let's go a little deeper into ongoing client relationships, because in the book we talked about the benefits of having flow-based onboarding, repeat business, referrals. Where can this wanting, needing, waiting that stifles acting in the certain way be in these regards? And how can we allow ourselves to be thus acting in the certain way, as he articulates, the way of certainty, by releasing identification to the wanting, needing, waiting? Well, in onboarding, it could appear as, and again, onboarding, we talk about in the book, is how we can have a wonderful relationship with the client after they become clients, and then deliver on promises, which can then not only facilitate a wonderful relationship with the client, but also facilitate ongoing business, because they know you now, they like you now, and they trust you now. They may refer business to you. They may consider taking you up on a number of offers. They may even reach out and say, I want to see what else you're offering during onboarding, smooth onboarding. Wanting the perfect onboarding experience and overcomplicating what could be warm and simple. Needing to feel ultra professional to be seen as legitimate. Waiting to build an automated system before welcoming clients properly. All of this, we could say, is the result of lack of self-confidence, yet that's not shaming and condemning. You can release this illusion of lacking self-confidence by acting in the certain way. And by illusion of lack of self-confidence, what I mean specifically is those are beliefs stored in the subconscious mind. By the way, if you're interested in going deeper into how to release identification to these beliefs, I have my very precise subconscious mind program, which I'll link to in the description. But essentially, as you release this wanting, needing, waiting beliefs, self-confidence is the result. Just as if you release the wanting, needing, waiting beliefs by acting in the certain way is effortless. You see it? Repeat business, wanting to look professional rather than making natural, casual asks after delivering a win, needing the client to be 100% thrilled before feeling it's okay to ask, missing thus timely opportunities, waiting to build a referral program, overthinking instead of simply encouraging sharing now. Those are some examples. And with respect to referrals, here is where wanting, needing, and waiting can appear, thus throttling the flow of acting in the certain way. And by releasing identification to wanting, needing, waiting, the natural way is the certain way. Wanting the client to remember them later instead of creating natural re-engagement points, needing a new website or system to upsell rather than making a direct offer based on what's working, waiting to design the perfect offer stack instead of following curiosity and demand. So we may see a commonality here. I trust you see it. The procrastinating as a result of perfectionism is a sign of identification to particular beliefs, which we can say are generating the illusion of lack of self-confidence. And thus, as a result, the individual has a hard time acting in the certain way. And then they may get involved with all kinds of psychobabble, spiritual bypassing, philosophical theories, etc., that although can sound interesting, have nothing to do with acting in the certain way, which will prove an equation that they already are all that they desire to be, that they already have that $1 million, and they can actualize it in the certain way. And then after actualizing it, or even during, when they get some insights, they could share. But that'll be based on results. That will be based on real results. And what I found is those results, when shared, because they're based on experience, are very helpful when you too may, as a result of that, end up starting your own coaching, consulting, training, and facilitation business based on results. So I trust you found today's video to be helpful. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.